Right. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I'm Tom Storrar. I'm head of web archiving at the National Archives UK. So I'm going to talk to you today about things that we do involving web archiving at the National Archives, as well as in general what the National Archives is, and a few other details that I hope will be of interest. So at the National Archives, we run two web archiving services, and I'll talk mostly about the first of these, the UK Government Web Archive, but I'll also talk about the EU Exit Web Archive in brief. So the UK Government Web Archive is a web archive that we founded at the National Archives a long time ago, actually in 2003, although we gained access to a back catalogue of data from the Internet Archive back to 1996. And it fits into our mission as an organisation and as a non-ministerial department as part of the UK government for England and Wales, and we're the guardians of over 1,000 years of iconic and national documents. So the UK Government Web Archive is an open access web archive, and we capture, preserve and make accessible UK central government information published on the web. And we include videos, tweets and websites dating back to 1996. So just a little bit on our sort of legislative basis for what we do. One of the largest sort of backers for what we do is actually under the Public Records Act in 1958. So obviously there was no web in 1958, but there are a couple of parts of that piece of legislation that really support us in what we're doing. Basically, it says that the keeper of records needs to take all practicable steps for preservation of records under his charge, and that those those records need to be selected and they need to be permanently preserved under safekeeping rules. And sort of most interestingly, that records include not only written records, but records conveying information by any means whatsoever. So that's quite handy when it comes to websites. We're also able to offer an open web archive because of the copyright laws that exist in the UK, and in particular Crown copyright, which says that civil servants, ministers and government are covered by Crown copyright, and that we can make open access to most of this content under the Open Government Licence. So it very much helps for the fact that we are archiving the web resources and the content of government departments rather than private individuals. So this is just a very high-level flavour of the kind of websites we capture. So they are government websites, but it's good to see a fair amount of colour on the screen. And they really range from traditional static websites through to interactive games, interactive knowledge-sharing platforms, and a little bit more recently, social media. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and give you some more details about how we archive these platforms. So in terms of what we capture, so it's about 800 distinct websites at the moment that make up the central sort of state, if you like, in the United Kingdom. And these central government departments and other public bodies, agencies and so on, hub sites such as gov.uk, which is the sort of the centralised citizen-facing site in the UK. National health service websites that cover the entire country or regions, and also public inquiries, which are a significant part of our work. And as I think you would expect, we on these websites we take everything we can where possible. So publications, data sets, images, videos, and so on. Our approach is to take a deep and complete capture of every website that we archive, and we put a lot of emphasis and we put a lot of effort into making sure that the quality, completeness, and fidelity is as high as possible. As Daniel said in his excellent talk, I mean, this is really problematic. It's a constant battle. It's a technical battle to use tools, to evolve your tools and your methodology for verifying and fixing issues. But it is also, as he said, a skills issue. So it's I would completely agree with him on those points. So far we've captured our web archive is about 220 terabytes. So it's not quite as large as the national domain, the national libraries, because we have a smaller number of websites, but it's still significant. So our crawl methodology, again, is a little bit different to, I think, a lot of national libraries and archives as well. So we tend to do our archiving on a domain or host level. And what I mean by that is that we launch crawls with a particular scope that restricts the crawler to a domain. So in this example, we have the Food Standards Agency, which is food.gov.uk, and we add some additional certs and additional accept rules to the scope of the crawl so that they are crawled as one cohesive unit. And that enables us to crawl in depth, limit the crawl to a sort of practical level, practical volume, and it also makes quality assurance a lot easier. Even though we do restrict in this way to domains, we frequently run into 2 or 3 million URLs per crawl for some of these domains because they are very large. So in terms of what we need from the website producers who we have some contact with in other government departments, we do need the websites to be publicly available. We can't archive, well, we don't archive at the moment intranets and extranets, and that is for two reasons really. That's one is security, the obvious security reason of gaining access in the first place, and secondly the idea that we wouldn't be able to manage a sort of credential system to restrict access in the archive. But it's something that we're interested in looking into in the future. And then highly complex websites require special tools that don't always scale. And I mean, there's been some really good movement in this space. Daniel mentioned Web Recorder, and there are various tools that will help us, and a bit more on that in a minute. So we actually have an outsourced model of web archiving largely, although we're doing increasing amounts of work in-house. So our in-house team, to look at the left-hand side of the screen at the moment, is about 9 strong at the moment. We actually outsource a lot of our crawling operations to MirrorWeb, who are a specialist web crawling organisation. Now they use the Heritrix crawler and Web Recorder and Conifer and various other tools in order to get as high a fidelity capture as possible. We've put a lot of effort in the last couple of years to build our kind of institutional awareness, knowledge and skills in running some operations in-house. So in particular, we use Conifer and Browsertrix. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this, there are quite a lot of names involved in web archiving, but Conifer is what used to be called the Web Recorder platform. It's a browser-based interactive archiver. You sort of do a point and click, and it creates an archive, a WARC file for you at the end. And Browsertrix is a sort of automated version of that. It's a it's rather than spinning up, rather than crawling like Heritrix does in largely static pages, Browsertrix uses virtual browsers in order to render and archive as much content as possible. So it's very good for JavaScript and so on. We also use Archive Web Page, which is quite similar to Conifer, and we've been using Instaloader for about 9 months for archiving Instagram accounts. So this is an overview of our process. So it goes from the top left to the bottom right. So as Daniel was saying, it's kind of like this end-to-end process where we have a lot of input into what's crawled. We then do a lot of quality assurance, which then produces WARC files that we then ingest into our digital preservation system. We then are also responsible for making sure that the content is accessible and it's also searchable. So we do things like we update our search service, more on that in a minute, and also do some cataloging so the websites sit alongside the other government records that we have at the National Archives. So in terms of when we capture, so this is a kind of, there are 3 broad models, if you like, and we've sort of devised these over the years that we've been operating, and it works well for us working as a government department archiving government websites. So first is to a schedule. So typically this is every 4 to 6 months. Gov.uk is crawled monthly, every single month in totality. 4 to 6 months is about the right balance for us in terms of completeness and not missing content that is sort of depublished, if you like. But we also have mechanisms whereby we can find out about newly published and priority content that we can go in and capture on a very small scale. So that's the schedule, and that forms most of what we've been crawling over the years. Then there's on demand. So this is almost like a sort of nomination process, if you like, in a national libraries model, I suppose, where website owners approach us and say, we are closing a website or we are removing content of it or on it. Can you please do an archive? And so we will do one on demand. And then third, and most significantly in recent times, for various reasons, in response to national events and international events indeed. So Brexit, COVID-19, of course, very time critical content. The content that government and all organisations publishes is very frequently revised. So we're in the interest of capturing all the iterations of this guidance to tell the full story going forward. And we've included a keyword-driven crawl technique in this as well, which I'll briefly describe. So this is a sort of overview of our response to COVID-19. The green pillars are sort of full crawls of selected domains, so gov.uk and health domains and so on. The blue circles are focus crawls, often using Conifer. So this is where we've got complex dynamic content or interactive content, or just a single page in a single document that is being updated daily. So we'll capture those very frequently and quite light touch, but using a specific tool. And then the sort of yellow bar across the top there is they're shallow crawls, but they are very broad. So what we do is we locate interesting content across all of the websites that are in scope for us, all of those government domains, effectively using a process whereby we give keywords to a program, and it will go off and it will find mention of those keywords in the pages that we seed it with. When we locate we would locate those pages that have those keywords. We then do a crawl with 2 hops, so 2 additional depth, and that gives us this broad sweep of the overall picture. Because I mean, this is important because we wouldn't be able to crawl several hundred websites every day, and this gives us just the ability to sort of top up our collection and add a bit of extra value to it. So it's really, since the COVID situation, since the pandemic has increased, and also the Brexit, the UK leaving the European Union, we've increased markedly the number of captures we've been doing. So I mean, this is gov.uk. So you'll see that in 2018 we had 100 odd captures, and that's that went up by fourfold in the next 2 years, and then it's already doubled this year. And our web archive has grown by 30% just in 2020. So this has introduced a lot of challenges. Crawl management is, the more crawls you do, using the more tools, the variety of tools, the more complexity you introduce to it. It's still worth it for the outcome, because you end up with a higher quality sort of final product, if you like. And this obviously has a knock-on effect to QA. So we do still spend a lot of time on QA. And of course, overall costs in terms of storage and search index management as well. But those things are sort of secondary, and capturing the record is the most important thing. So as we're a public record, I'll just say a few words about Takedown before I talk a bit more about access. So Takedown requests involves removing public access to a resource, but we never touch the underlying archive. So when an archive file is produced by a crawler, that remains static, and it will remain so forever. We just have a system where we can mask access to the content and remove access to that publicly. So we have a publish policy. So I would certainly recommend, one of my recommendations would be, in terms of setting up a web archive, a public web archive, would be to have a published policy that explains the situation under which you will consider removing access to content. And the criteria are the type you would expect, really. Content that perhaps shouldn't have been released in the first place because it contains sensitive personal information or commercial data. Other exemptions from our Freedom of Information Act. And also, of course, intellectual property, information rights, copyright matters that come to our attention. So yes, a lot of the model that I will show you will be quite familiar. So this is just I was going to do a live demo, but I decided against it at the last minute. So this is a classic timeline page for a slightly more peripheral website that we take snapshots of, and I'm providing the links in the presentation here, and you'll have copies of the presentation if you wish to investigate more yourselves in your own time. This is our search service. So we use an Elasticsearch service that runs in the cloud. I should have said that at the beginning, that we do use a cloud service to run our web archive. And this is a full text search of all of the web archive. It has about 450 million documents indexed in it so far. Further to Andrew's comments about user research, we are actually embarking on a major user research project over the next 6 months, really, to improve our search service. One of the effects of us doing all of these additional archives is that we've ended up with a lot of additional noise in the search index, and we also want to introduce some more innovative and interesting functionality. But nonetheless, having said that, the search does work fairly well. So please have a play. And then onto social media. So we archive in in addition to the Instagram accounts I was just mentioning, which are not yet publicly available, we do archive Twitter, and we present it through an interface that looks like this. So the idea is that we're not replicating the Twitter interface, but we are doing something similar, something familiar to Twitter. And we present the tweets just of government departments and the bodies that we archive, but not any replies or retweets. So it is just one side of the conversation, but that's because we're only permitted to do that under the legislation in which we operate. So we capture through this, we capture the tweets and the links, and also any video content or images, that kind of thing.
Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your time is up.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, about 1 minute ago. So I will have to ask you to just close to the end, if you can say something which will end your story, and the question and question and answer, of course,
Sure.
will begin. Okay.
That's absolutely fine. Okay. So similar things for the other social media platforms. We have a search service as well, and we also have a publicly available EU Exit Web Archive, which is an archive of EU law at the point at which the UK left the European Union. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions now, and also I'm happy to answer any by email.
Thank you, Tom. Tom Storrar from British National Archive. Tom, I hope that you can hear it.
Hi, I am from the Web Archive of the Hungarian National Library, and I would like to ask about your experiences with browser tricks. That all for what purpose you are doing. We've just started some experiments with it store 3 weeks ago, and seems really promising.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's a great tool. It's a really useful innovation. It takes some getting used to. I think it's quite different to the way that Heritrix is, runs if you're used to dealing with that. But we have found it to be enormously beneficial in terms of just the volumes of content that we can get on particularly JavaScript heavy sites. So it scales really well. It's not the silver bullet, it doesn't answer all our problems, but the ability to capture with fidelity these JavaScript heavy sites is really impressive. There's also a very nice innovation in it using Puppeteer, which allows you to automate some basic interaction with sites, such as loading additional pages so that it kind of loads in, or doing some basic interactions. And we've done some experimentation with those, and we've started to use those in production now, and that's very, very good, because a few months ago we would have someone in the team using Conifer clicking the load more buttons at the bottom of each page to get content to load up, and it's taken away that overhead, which is a big thing for us. So I would say it's still very much being developed, and it's still an active research project, I would say. I think that's fair. But it's, as you say, it has enormous potential. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Pierwsze pytanie mamy za sobą. Czy są kolejne pytania z sali? Bardzo prosimy o mikrofon.
Hi, Tom. I have 2 questions. How many people is working in National Archive on archiving the website, English websites? And second, I don't know if you have enough time. Could you tell us some words about the huge project I heard 5-6 years ago about archiving all websites in English language, which was conducted by National or British Library and countries of Commonwealth, yes?
Sure. So on the first question, there are 9 of us in the team at the National Archives. We've expanded our team quite a lot in the last year, up from, I think, 5 this time last year to 9 now. So that's given us a lot more capacity. But I would say that a lot of the technical operations are still done by our suppliers, Mirrorweb, and they do have a team. They have other contracts to service as well. But yeah, there's still plenty of work to do, even though our team has doubled in size in that time. On the question about the wider UK websites and further afield, that's really a question for the British Library. We are quite separate organisations. I believe they're still doing an annual domain crawl, and I think they do talk about that on their blog, but I've not caught up with it recently. So yeah, sorry, I can't answer that.
No to teraz jeszcze jedno pytanie ode mnie. Czy Państwo mają jakieś pytania? A może pytanie od któregoś z naszych widzów? Mamy kolejnego pytającego na sali. A Państwa, naszych widzów, proszę o wykorzystanie jeszcze tych kilku minut, które nam pozostają, bo pytania do brytyjskich archiwów narodowych warto by wykorzystać ten czas. Bardzo proszę.
Hi, Tom. So I have 2 questions. One is quite technical: is what are you using Screaming Frog for? And the other one is, how do you analyze the takedown requests that you receive?
Okay, sure. So Screaming Frog is it's a Java-based application with a user interface, which is mostly for search engine optimization. And it basically crawls in a similar way to Heritrix, although it does have a JavaScript mode. Basically, our main use for Screaming Frog is to, in the QA process, is to use a separate crawler in order to build up lists of URLs that we can then verify against the web archive. So rather than putting all our eggs into one basket and just relying on Heritrix or Browsertrix to discover all the URLs that make up a site, we've opted to use Screaming Frog to generate a comparative list that we can then check the crawler logs and also CDX records to say, right, we've got this resource, or no, we haven't got this resource, we need to patch it in. So we found this really useful. We used to use another crawler called Zenu, but that didn't scale so well. So we've gone over to Screaming Frog. So I do recommend taking a look at it if you haven't already. And then on the takedown question, we have a takedown panel that meet. So there are some quite senior colleagues on that panel, data protection expert, and the kind of people you might expect to have a view about information rights and so on, information issues. So we meet every 6 to 8 weeks normally, and we discuss the cases that are pending, and we reach a decision about whether or not they meet the criteria.